Hey everyone, I'm Kate Kennedy and I'm here with day 83 of 100 Days of Kane, PA. And it is Wednesday night, so you know what that means. That means it's history night here at the Kane Depot, where we hear stories of Kane's history from the Kane Historic Preservation Society. And tonight we're going to hear from Dick Bly about the Holgate Brothers Toy Company. I know so many of you had those wooden Holgate toys growing up, and today Dick is going to share a little bit about how the toy factory ended up here, or the Holgate factory ended up here in Kane, and about some of the stories connected with that. So I'm going to go ahead and flip you around. We'll walk on in. Hello, Dick Bly.
Hi, Kate. How are you? Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for doing this tonight. I think this is a really interesting topic. We're going to be talking about the Holgate Brothers Holgate Brothers Company, right?
Correct.
Could you tell us where they started and how they got to Kane?
Yeah, it's a long, fascinating history, but I'll do it within a few minutes here. The company started back in 1789. Cornelius Holgate was over in Roxborough, which was near the center city of Philadelphia today. It was a colonial village, and he was making handles, hearth brush handles, broom handles, and then he would put them in his wagon, and he would take these out along the city at that point, Roxborough, and was selling them to local merchants. So that's really how the company started there. So after many years of being in Roxborough, and as Philadelphia was starting to develop into a city there, they migrated the business. His son Silas Holgate took over, and he sort of moved up into the up around the Wilkes-Barre and that area because of the abundance of beech wood up there, the forest up there. And then eventually Silas's sons, William and Arthur, they moved the business to Kane in 1884. They came here for really a couple reasons. The James family was really instrumental in them coming to Kane. They made some contact with Holgate because by this time in the 1800s they were making quite a few wooden handles and just not hearth brush and broom handles anymore. So the James family contacted them, told them about the big timber up here and the abundance of natural gas. So that combination was attractive to a wood products company. So they moved here, but their motto through time was always they were as old as the nation. Because in 1789, the year that the Constitution was signed, and we elected our first president, George Washington, that's when Cornelius Holgate started making wood handles.
Wow, yeah. And so when you talk about these wood handles, do you have any examples of what those might look like, or what types specifically of handles that they made?
We have a few here. I have many more in my collection, but we have a few here this evening, and these were donated by Frank Commuter. Just here the other day, so it kind of shows you a combination of the style of handles, and these were made in Kane, and many of them are marked either in the tag. So this handle here in particular, if we can turn this over, this is Keystone Lamp Manufacturing Company, and it's 1939, dated down here. So again, these are samples that Holgate would have kept, so when the customer comes back through again to do a reorder, they have the sample. So Holgate Brothers Company made, at their peak years here in Kane, they made well over 500 different styles of handles. So whether they were like paintbrush handles in a whole variety of shapes and sizes and painted, or just a natural finish, they were a huge wood products manufacturing company here in Kane. Locally, they were known as the Brush Block Factory. They were located up on Biddle Street. They occupied the entire block up there. Thus, they made brushes, so they became known as the Brush Block Factory.
Wow.
But they had with the 500 plus handles that they were making in their peak years, Holgate Brothers, they were well over 400 employees.
Wow.
So it was a huge operation here in Kane that they were making these wooden handles. So William and Arthur, the grandsons of Cornelius, moved it here in 1884. Silas, their father, actually came here with them. They settled on Dawson Street. They built a couple houses there, and they walked half a block to their factory and made handles. Now they were only here short-lived. They started in 1884. They were only here till 1887, and then for whatever reason, I've never been able to find out, but they sold the Holgate Brothers Company to a local concern by the name of Joshua Davis. And Joshua Davis was an industrialist here. He also was involved with Elizabeth Kane in the Spring Water Company and some other retail businesses uptown and that. So Joshua bought it and continued making handles and continued making improvements at the facility, plus also in expanding product lines and that.
And how long did he own it? How long did the Holgate business stay open here?
Well, Joshua, his son, became involved with it as well. So around the turn of the century, his son became involved with it. And Mr. Henretta, who was superintendent of schools at that time, around 1902, I believe it was, he retired from the school and took a position as vice president of Holgate Brothers Company. Through the years, Mr. Henretta was able to accumulate some stock in the company, and in the early 1930s, Mr. Henretta had finally purchased a controlling interest. But Joshua's son, William Davis, was in charge from passing on from his father, and it was really William too that his daughter was going to college at that time in the late 20s. And while there in the country, what was happening was that this kindergarten program was starting to develop. So there were educators who felt that preschool children should be able to learn with toys, because back then toys were kind of made locally. Maybe the local farmer during the winter months in his barn or something would make some wood toys and then sell them to different department stores. Like in Pittsburgh, Gimbel's was like a large department store, but also they acted as a wholesaler. So Gimbel's would sell out to many smaller department stores throughout Pennsylvania. So Macy's was the same way. They would sell throughout the New England and some of the eastern states over there. So that's how toys would be made. So whatever the farmer may have painted the barn with that year, maybe that's what they paint the toys with. So this kindergarten program started, so she was bringing back for her father information about this, and at that time they had a good relationship with Macy's department store. They were selling some wood handles to them. So Macy's invited them up in November of 1929, and they displayed up there their toys that they developed at that time. And there was quite a success, quite a positive reaction to them, that thus started Holgate Toy Company. So Holgate Toy starts in 1929, and because of the notoriety of the toys, most people, both in Kane and perhaps elsewhere in the country, they would remember Holgate Toy Company and not necessarily this large parent company called Holgate Brothers.
Right. So at the same time as they were making the toys and starting that company, were they continuing to make the handles?
Oh, they were. Oh, yeah, they continued.
So it was both.
Yeah, they continued making both. The Holgate Brothers Company, as I said, I mean, up around World War II was probably like their peak years in that, in the mid 40s. 400 plus, 500 employees.
Right.
So they had this little small toy division that was more of a seasonal kind of business as well. But again, because of who the toy designer was, Denny Driscoll talked about this a few weeks ago, Jarvis Rockwell, and that was the connection. Jarvis, not to go back through some history here, but he was on Wall Street, kind of left Wall Street, was living up in Rochester, New York at that time. He was making doll houses for Macy's, and the buyer at Macy's, who knew Henretta and the Holgate Brothers Company, and because they were exhibiting their toys up in 1929, he put Rockwell in connection with Henretta, and Henretta made him an offer. he couldn't refuse.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
Because I do
There's all
think,
these links.
but I do think that you're right that more people probably are familiar with the Holgate wooden toys than they are with the handles.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So you were saying that this was really designed with an educational component in mind. So what are some? Do you have some examples that you can share of some of the more popular toys or even rare toys that were made?
Absolutely. Down in the lowercase down here, the bingo bed. And this was a toy that was developed in 1934 by Holgate. In fact, a woman from Ohio, it was her design. She approached, and Jarvis Rockwell was here by then, and she approached Holgate with this design, and so as best as I could understand from former management, that she was paid a nickel royalty on every one that was sold, and that was their most popular toy through time, and still we were making this up in the 1990s as well.
It's a timeless
pounding toy, and the idea is there's 4 different size dials in there, and you should be able to drive the dials through. And then you have some size, discrimination there to be able to determine what size goes in what hole there. Mm-hmm. And the concept is when the child pounds it through, I guess they yell bingo. And, but that's how the toy developed there. And again, one of the more popular toys. The Raggedy Ann and Andy on top here. These were made in the 1930s, late 30s. And they only made them for probably a year, maybe a year and a half. So they're pretty rare. If you can find these, they do get purchased probably more from Raggedy Ann and Andy doll collectors than necessarily Holgate collectors. And they're pretty valuable, especially if they're really in good shape. But it's a take-apart toy. The head comes off, the bodies come apart. You can kind of intermatch the real classic Piper Cub airplane over here in the corner. I can move some of the handles, but that Piper Cub, again, only made for a couple years. Pretty rare to find all the wings intact because normally the propeller or the rear wing or something is busted off it. But this one is pretty pristine, and it has the Cub, the artwork from Jarvis Rockwell on the back there. The 636, the number on there, where you see numbers on Holgate toys, that relates to the product item number. So again, it's one way people know for collecting purposes and that.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's such a variety too.
Yeah, and it's really, we have, here's a photo in the 1940s. So it's in front of the Holgate Toy Building. The Holgate Toy Building was across from Holgate Brothers, the big wooden handle company there. And your viewers here would remember that as Kane Handle back in that day. But this was Holgate Toy Company, and it was the glass factory before that that John had talked about in his presentation. But the rail cars out front here with the banners on them, as you can see where the toys are being shipped. They're all packed in the fall time here, heading out to the West Coast to meet the demands of sales that was in Portland and San Francisco and elsewhere.
So they were made here and shipped all over.
Shipped all over, yeah. They had a sales force eventually up in New York City. Jim Dunleavy, and I think this is a picture of Jim Dunleavy down here, and one of the highlights of Holgate's. This was a publication that they printed for a number of years, and primarily in the 40s. But Jim was a sales manager up in New York City, so yeah, they were distributed all over the country, we have a number of photos. This is just one of them of they're packing Rocky color cones, these stacking cones, and so this is 1938. Pretty cool.
That's a really cool photo.
Yeah. And then this shows from one of the trade shows. They set up this at the Holgate plant before going to the show, but you can see on the back wall that they have their handles on display, and just a variety of saw handles and hairbrush handles and paint handles,
So this is a good reflection of everything that Holgate Brothers Company made.
yeah, it really is. I mean, it gives a sample, and again, for whatever show they were going to, they would set up. And but the toy company back then, they would do the New York Toy Show, which is the largest American toy show in the country, still active up there as well. During World War II, and only for about less than 2 years, they made Army vehicles, field guns, jeeps, ambulances, tanks, 2 different kind of tanks in that. So this one, you can. I'll give you a little collector trade secret.
Oh.
A way to identify a Holgate toy. Now the pressure's on. But if you find a Holgate toy and the wheels are attached with wooden dowels, that was made during World War II. Because metal was in complete demand by the military at that time. So Holgate switched over, and they couldn't get metal products in that, their ring nails, things like that. So they switched over into using a dowel. So if you find a toy with a wooden dowel in it, you can be sure that it was made during World War II.
How interesting. So this would be an example of that.
That was an example of that.
And I see the number on there too, 669.
Yep,
I'm learning a lot.
you are. Yep.
That's really cool.
The tractor trailer down here, a great photo. I'm not sure how it's going to come through with the glass reflecting there, but this was up on Well Street in front of the Holgate Brothers and Toy Company main office in the big building up there, which now is where Country Fair would be located, Northwest Bank. It's that whole block up there. But this was Milton Coleman. Milton Coleman was Dick Coleman's uncle, and he would transport, but this was going to the World's Fair. So in 1939, they were taking an exhibit up to the World's Fair in New York City.
Wow. That's a great piece of history right there. Right here in Kane.
Right here in Kane. And they did their, Dick Rockwell was always, as he made up a toy, he wanted to kid test it, before getting it out and before having it published in a catalog, before taking it to the toy shows. And so he would use the kindergarten program here in Kane with some of the schools. And this is a photo from, I believe it's either Central or Clay Street, but I think it's Clay Street School. And I have other photos in my collection of children playing and testing. So they have a lacing shoe over here that they're working on. And so again, he would, and also Jarvis would have some of the employees take some toys home or have the kids come up into his office, his studio. And we saw his studio last week, or a couple weeks ago there when Denny was talking. But he'd have the children come up into that area, and he would have them test and even at times take the toy home and then get back from the parents as to what the feedback was on those toys. And it was kind of the first step process of him doing his toy testing. So,
how neat.
sort of like a focus group nowadays, but not as
some of
detailed.
the people that are here in Kane may have been the guinea pigs for some of these Holgate.
They might have been. and if somebody was, we would love to talk with them.
Yeah,
and,
we'd love to hear that story too, right?
And this little desk over here, we talked about Frank Comeder earlier about donating the handles to us, and we really appreciate that. He also donated this Holgate nail and peg desk. So it's it's all attached here. The child would sit there, and then they had some small hammers. They had some small nails back in those days. But the child would do some craft type activities on top of this little desk here.
That's neat.
Versus probably being on the kitchen table or the dining table.
Right. It's their own little space
so,
to explore and create. How cool! So that's a really neat donation that you guys received.
Yeah, this is one of their master cartons from the probably the early 50s. So again, stamped Holgate toys. That was their logo at the time. And years ago, I went to an auction because somebody told me that they were going to be selling a point of purchase display, which is up on the wall here with the bingo bed.
Oh yeah.
And, so it's that H, it's that horse, or whatever you want to call it, and the train as well as entertain. That was their tagline at that point. But this is a rare piece too, because I've never come across one since, and nor have I seen one in a catalog or anything. But it's a great find. Kathy Decio, a number of years ago, she donated this Holgate Brothers Company, going back to the Brothers Company, wooden top of a wooden crate here, and has Kane, PA on it.
How cool!
Yeah, so it just things show up, and we always love receiving toys or handles or photographs or whatever memorabilia.
Yeah, more pieces of the Holgate Brothers Company history.
There's one other toy, and it's really quite unique, quite rare, and it's actually an original prototype. It was never produced by Holgate, but Dr. Wink, his daughter, lived down at State College. So in the late 80s, I had restarted the company because Holgate Brothers Company operated up until about the late 50s, and then Mr. Henrietta, who was the controlling interest, the shareholder in the company, he was up in age, and he sold the company to an outfit out of the Pittsburgh area. And they only operated Holgate Brothers for about a year and a half, and they closed it down. They completely liquidated it, and that was the end of making handles and Kane. The toy division, a few years before that, in the 1950s, Bill Henrietta, Mr. Henrietta's youngest son, he moved the business down to Statesville, North Carolina. And Holgate Toy Company continued down there for a few years, and then Play School, who was the chief rival of Holgate through all those years, the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s, Play School bought Holgate Toy Company. And they wanted two things. They wanted the name Holgate, and they wanted Jarvis Rockwell, the toy designer. So they ended up with both. Jarvis went on with Play School and kept developing toys there up until 1970 when he retired from Play School. So in the late 80s, I restarted Holgate, and but I was down at a toy promotion in State College, and Mrs. Kristoff came by, Dr. Wink's daughter. She never had children, and she was outside the store sitting on this bench, had a shopping bag with her, and she said, are you Mr. Bly? And I said, yes, I am. And she said, well, I have a gift for you, and she said, I want this to go back to Kane. So she pulled out of there this engine 512 in the back row there, and locomotive engine. There's hardwood blocks in the back of it, and it's all screen printed. The wheels all assembled. Now the body of it is made out of pine, and the wheels, the smokestack, and all the blocks are hardwood. So Jarvis, he would always make his prototypes out of pine because pine is so much easier to cut than hard maple or beech or one of our hardwood species. So he would make a prototype out of pine, and they would decorate it, they would assemble it, and then they would give it to a child and see what would happen. So for whatever reason, this didn't fly.
Oh.
It never made the catalog. So Jarvis gave it to Dr. Wink. Dr. Wink gave it to his daughter because she was the toy tester of it. And she kept it all those years, and
How neat.
so it came back to Kane. So it's a real rare and unique, and then a special piece.
It's very special.
Yeah.
It has a great story behind it. That's really, really neat.
Yeah.
To see something that was created but never made it to the mass production stage. Cool. What a great
And then the last here, this just showed up on our counter.
It's amazing.
It's amazing how
it's,
it's a toy, it's just fun. It's that magic of Christmas. But this was the Kurt Hartman. had donated this to us a few weeks ago from the days that when he played with it. And Kurt said he mastered it finally, so he was able to donate it to us. So the mastering is you have different size and shaped blocks, and they would fit through the shape sorter. So it was a shape sorter, but it was based on a story called The House That Jack Built. So this was the house that Jack built, and on the blocks are all screen printed features from the story, from the children's story there. So you have Malt, and you have the farmer, and you have a rooster, and but it's the house that.
So there's a story that went along with it, and
Story
then
went along with it, yeah. Sort of nursery rhyme, yeah, nursery story, and
then the learning part, the educational piece, was the sorting of the shapes.
yeah, and that was really the key with whole. You know, it was interesting when we had restarted the company. And today the toys are heavily tested, as they should be for preschool children now. But we would test some of the old toys with the toy safety lab that we used up at Buffalo, New York. And so we'd take some of the old toys up there and we'd have them scrape off some of the old paint, spray paint, the screen print and that, and actually test it to today's standards and see how much, if any, lead was in it. And all of the paints, any toy we ever tested, met or exceeded the standards today.
Wow.
So even back then, these were lead-free toys because they realized that early kindergarten group that they wanted to have, safe playthings. They didn't children be gnawing on these things, and if they're painted, they should be, better protected than the farmer's red paint that they're used to painting his barn with.
Yeah,
So-
that's so interesting. And so you kind of touched on this, that the end of Holgate was in the 50s, but then it was restarted in the 80s, and you did that. Could you talk a little bit about that experience and maybe some of the pieces that were developed then?
Well, yeah, I mean, we brought out the line back, some of the classic toys that they made, the bingo bed, the Rocky color cone, lacing beads, things like that were strong sellers, and then we reintroduced them. And then it was in 1990. I was driving out after lunch to Ideal Farms because we were located out there, and on the radio, Paul Harvey said today was Mr. Rogers' birthday. And so I thought, well, I didn't grow up with Fred. I was a little bit older when his program started. But being a Pittsburgh neighbor, I thought, well, let's send him one of our toys. And which we did. We sent him one of our Fairyland train sets, a 5-piece train set based on classic nursery rhymes, nursery stories. Sent it to Fred. Had a letter in there. And I purely was telling Fred that in addition to happy birthday, that if he ever wanted to film a little wooden toy manufacturing company in Kane, Pennsylvania, we'd love to have him. Now, I purely naively sent that out to Family Communications, Fred's company, and I was hoping to get back a letter from Mr. Rogers signed, and we could display that in our office, and that would be the end of it. And 3 days later, Bill Eisler, who at that time was the president of Family Communications, Fred's company, called and said, Fred received the toy, the gift, thanked us for it. He remembered Holgate from the past, and were we interested in coming down and talking to them about producing the neighborhood trolley. So a few weeks later, off to Pittsburgh we went, and it created a 15, 16-year relationship up until his death in 2003. And so I spent many days down in Family Communications, down with Fred, down with Bill Eisler. So we developed a real personal relationship as well as a business one. And the great thing about Fred was what you saw is exactly what you got.
Yeah.
So there was no acting. It was just Fred.
That was him.
And so, anyways, we produced the neighborhood trolley, which is a half scale. This is half the size of the original one that you would see on this TV program. The one, the TV program is made out of metal. This is all hardwoods, and so it's a near replica of Mr. Rogers' trolley, and they're still producing it today. The company's over in Bradford, and with the forthcoming movie with Tom Hanks, it'll probably be a strong seller for them. And but yeah, it was just a wonderful. I mean, Fred came to Kane twice to see the employees and spend some time up here. So we quietly, as best we could, got him into town and quietly got him out of town before it created too much of a ruckus. And
That's amazing. So you're driving in your car, you just hear this little fact that it's Fred Rogers' birthday. You send a letter hoping at best to get a letter back with his signature, and it results in a personal relationship, a couple of visits from him, and this awesome trolley made of wood. What a really cool story that is.
Yeah, it was just a great and we had when Fred had died, they had a memorial service for him, and it was an invite memorial service, and so Denny Driscoll and myself were invited down. Denny had when Fred was up here the first time before we were going to a couple different places, and we stopped at Denny's studio down here on Chase Street, and Denny, we only had about 10 minutes, they told us, for Fred, and I think it was an hour later. This is before the Resolute desk and Elijah Kane and the tea set, and so. But anyways, Fred was so impressed with Denny that they had purchased one of Denny's paintings. In fact, it's the one hanging up over here, and so that painting actually still to this day hangs over Joanne Rogers, Fred's wife, over their bed.
How
so
amazing!
He was quite impressed with Denny, and so. But yeah, went down for the memorial service, and so it was just a wonderful relationship, wonderful memories, and a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, what cool stories to learn what started as a handle company, ended up becoming a wooden toy company that resurged in the 80s and brought Mr. Rogers here. So there's a really fascinating history right here in Kane. Is there anything else that you wanted to share that you didn't get a chance to?
The only other thing to mention is that we've had speedy delivery. We've had Mr. McFeely come up here on two occasions, both at the depot here, and we did a promotion, and the ATA had their bus up here, the trolley up here, and I mean, there was a line, Kate, from the back where Mr. McFeely was at, all the way out through the front door all afternoon.
Yeah.
And I mean, Mr. McFeely, David Newell, but Mr. McFeely, so much Fred-like qualities to him. His energy level from the beginning of that promotion to the very end was the same for every child coming through here. So
That's
it's
awesome.
just fantastic memories.
Yeah, those are great memories and great stories, and I'm so glad that you were able to share them today. Is there anything else before we wrap up?
No, because I think I heard the bell that my time is up, Kate. So.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share these great stories and just to remind us of this piece of our history here in Kane.
Well, thank you.
And thank you guys for tuning in. I'm sure so many of you remember having a Holgate toy at one point or another. And we would love to hear from you or see your toys. So in the comments, please share which toys you enjoyed playing with, or share a picture of the toys that you had growing up or even have to this day. And if you are looking for a place to give some old Holgate toys a home, check with the depot. And if they don't have one of the pieces that you might have, they would be glad to store it here so that so many people can enjoy that piece of history as well. So just a reminder, they're here at the depot every Wednesday night and every Saturday and Sunday, and anyone is welcome anytime, or they can be reached by appointment for tours and to share information. So thank you again for tuning in. I do love Wednesday nights, learning about the history here in Kane. We have some pretty cool stories that have been shared already, and also would love to hear some of the stories that you want to hear shared in the next 2 weeks. We only have 2 Wednesdays left. So if you have any ideas, please let us know that as well. So thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you again tomorrow.